Hi. Happy Father's Day. So I did have quite an experience. It was quite a night. I was down in Parkville fishing, and I got done, and I was taking off my gear, and I hear this woman walking down the street. She's all worked up, and she's, sir, can you help me? And she's crying. She's. So I put her in my vehicle, and I finished getting my gear off. I get in and get ready to, pull away and just let her explain what had happened. She had been involved with a man who was in a biker gang, and they got into an altercation. Her boyfriend's daughter's boyfriend had come up behind her and held her arms like this behind her back while the daughter went through her purse, stole her phone and some of her other belongings, and then her boyfriend continued to abuse her and ultimately put her down on the ground and step on her face. So she asked me if I could take her to Three Rivers, to where she, if you could just take me to the Wendy's, and I can charge this phone that I was able to get, and I can call my daughter. I'm like, well, where do you live? I can take you home. She was like, I live in Elkhart, Indiana. And she goes, I can walk. I've done it before. And so I proceed to drive, and she's, it's just saying over and over again, this is the lowest I've ever been in my life. I can't, believe how bad things are. She's had several kids. They've been taken away from her. She's had problems with drugs, but she got clean, but she relapsed through this relationship. And she's like, I should call the police. And I said, yeah, I think you should. I would take you there if you want to do that. And then she decided that she didn't want it. She was scared. She didn't want to do that. And I said, well, I'll do whatever. I'll take you home, whatever you need me to do. And so we ended up going to Culver's, and she went into the bathroom and got herself fixed up. By the time she came out, she decided she did want to call the police. I said, okay, I think that's good. So we drove through Three Rivers. I parked, and I said, we need to call the sheriff. And so I called dispatch, explained to them the situation. She said, well, I'll have the sheriff contact you. She took my information. We're sitting there, and then I began to just talk to her, because she said that, God has just forgotten about me. He doesn't really, he's not here. He doesn't really care. And so I just began to tell her about, my experience with God, and that, God is here. He knows everything that you're going through, and He cares about you. So what I forgot to tell you is when she first got into my vehicle and told me everything that happened, when she was kind of done, and I sensed it was my turn to talk, I said, the bad news is that you're going through this whirlwind and all this miserable, terrible stuff right now. And that's going to take some time probably to get through. I said, but the good news is that you made it to your divine appointment. You're here, you're in good hands, and God cares about you. So we're sitting in this parking lot, and I begin to tell her a little bit about how God has worked in my life. And I said, when I was about 5 years old, my parents took me to this Christian concert, and it was a Dallas home concert. And he had like one really big hit. It was called Rise Again. And that song has always touched me. And I told her, I said, I can't remember a time where I just didn't know that, Jesus wasn't God. I just always knew that as a little boy. And my parents took me to that concert, and he sang that song, and I told my parents, I said, I want to go forward. And they're like, you're really young. You sure you understand? I said, yeah, I do. I understand that Jesus is the Messiah. He's God in flesh. I get it. And they're like, okay. So from that moment on, life happened. I'm still, a rebellious teenager. I have problems with alcohol. And it was such a problem in my life that I had so many run-ins with the police that the last time that I had a problem, the prosecutor said, we want this man to do 5 years in Jackson prison. And I proceeded to tell her that, but God had other plans for me, because I went to Bible school instead of going to prison for 5 years. The day that I went to Bible school, they said, you've come at a great time. Because in 3 days, we're going to go down to the RCA Dome, and we're going to be part of a 1,000-voice choir. And I'm thinking, great, I can't wait. So we get there, I take my place on the risers behind the platform up front, and I'm kind of dead center on this platform. Out walks David Wilkerson, who I had no idea who Dave Wilkerson was, but he happened to be the founder of the school that I was going to. And he said some words, and then later on, this other man comes walking onto the platform, and he begins to sing Rise Again, and it's Dallas Home. And God spoke to me in that minute, and I broke in front of thousands of people, because God said to me, you are mine, you've always been mine, I've always been with you, and I've never left you. And it just wrecked me in front of everybody. Things did not get easier for me when I got out of Bible school. But God was there and brought me through all of it. A lot of my problems were my own choices, but not all of them were. But there were whirlwinds in my life that have lasted. But God has always been faithful and good. And I told her, I said, that story, I said, you can't make this stuff up. I said, that's divine providence right there. That is God orchestrating. I said, that happened when I was 5 years old. And I said, you know what? I said, that happened right here in Three Rivers. And then I looked up and it dawned on me, I'm sitting in the parking lot across the street from the very church where it took place. And I told her that, and it just I could see things happening in her. And then the sheriff got called. I explained the situation. The officer, I said, you're on speakerphone. The woman is here with me. And so they start to talk, at first the officer is, is like with any domestic type of situation, and she said, you have a history with this man, and you have a history of kind of beating on each other. So it's kind of like they're not real keen on, really believing the whole story here and everything. And at this point, I'm still not sure because I don't know much. I just want to be in this moment and be used by the Lord in this person's life. And so we finished. I said, she goes, it's going to be about 45 minutes or so before I can even get to you. I said, is there any other place where you can go so this gentleman doesn't have to take you all the way to Elkhart? And I said, officer, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take her home. But I said, tell me where I'll meet you. So she said, well, White Pigeon, and it'll be about 40 minutes before I can get there. So we drive, and as I'm talking with her, she starts to say, they never believe me. They're not going to believe me. I've had a PPO on this guy before, and then they removed it. And while he had the PPO, he would sit out in front of my house and harass me. And so out of fear, this woman ends up going back to this guy. And so I just continue to try and encourage. I said, you don't know that. I said, wait and see. God is working here. And we get there, the sheriff shows up, and at first it's more of the same type of words where this police officer is not ready to just believe her. And at some point I say, Sheriff, can I go into the gas station here? And she's like, yeah, no problem. So I walk in, I do my thing, I come out, and in that time that I was gone, the whole demeanor and atmosphere has changed. This officer is calling her hun. She's talking softly to her. She's supporting her. And she says, and you have all my information, and you can call me, and I'll help you. And now you can get this PPO on not only him, but his daughter and her boyfriend. And I'm going to go and arrest this guy. And she's getting ready to leave, and I motion for her just to wait. I get out, and I've got one of your little Bibles, Andy, that you have out there. And I take it to her, and I hand it to her, and I said, I just want you to know that I really appreciate you, and thank you for being here and helping, this woman and supporting her. And I said, my church, I said, I got to be a part of a group of us. We were supporting all the police officers. I said, you guys have really taken a beating the past few years, and we really appreciate you. And this sheriff, she starts to open up about her life. I didn't ask for it. She just starts talking about, and her brother has this huge meth problem and all of this. And I'm just kind of blown away by it, And I tell her, I said, I would, can I pray over you? And her eyes open up real wide. She's like, yeah. And so I hold out my hand to her, and she takes both of her hands and put them in, and I kind of just put my hand on top of her, and what is your name? She says, Veronica. And so I start to pray over her colleagues, and just, and God's protection and healing in her life and her family's life. And I finished, and that was really a good thing. It really was powerful, I thought. And we finished talking. We start to drive away, head towards Elkhart. And Elizabeth, who is the woman who was in trouble, she says, I just thank you so much. You have no idea how much you're helping me, and you've given me hope. And I said, this is all God at work here. And I said, you may see it that way, but this is just as much a blessing to me as it is for you, because for one, God is using me, but what a reinforcement and a blessing to my life that God shows up once again and reinforces, you are mine, you've always been mine, I'm still with you, I've never left you. We got to Elkhart, and I prayed over her. I hugged her. I didn't think appropriate at the time to ask for her number. She didn't offer, but I kind of wish I would have, because it would have been nice for our church to be able to follow up with her, and maybe I can contact the police department. We can make that happen. Maybe I should. Carol would be a wonderful person to coach this person, but that is very powerful. And I caught a monster smallmouth that day, too.